All right. See people piling in. Thanks so much for joining us for this month's episode of Perspectives webinar, all about the September slump. While we're waiting for others to join, because I know we're all bouncing from meeting to meeting, I just wanted to point out that today is Professional House Cleaners Day. So let us know where you're dialing in from. And also, what's your least favorite housekeeping chore? What's the kind you wish you never had to do again in celebration of Professional House Cleaners Day? So this is where I like to head over to the chat here and see what people are saying. Cleaning the bathroom. That one's got to go, right? No more laundry. I love it. Somebody calling in from Saudi Arabia, did I see? We see Northwest. Oh, you got Iowa. They're coming in fast and furious now. Nobody wants to do windows. Yep. Nope, nope, nope. What about Vanessa says no to the oven and the refrigerator? Yeah, I wouldn't want that either. Come on. Jay's got scrubbing the toilet. Renee's got dusting. Yeah, dusting. Dusting is like never ending. What's up with this? Dusting 100%, Amber agrees. Yep, yep. A lot of bathrooms getting a lot of votes. Dishes, I could see that. I actually like doing dishes. Maybe I'm just that weirdo. It's the way I transition from work day into home day. I do the dishes. Didn't know that about Maddie P. How about that? Northern New Jersey, love it. St. Louis, not far from where I grew up. Sink drains, clean the oven. Oh, I love a Swiffer for dusting. There we go. Product placement. Rach, let's see if we can get Swiffer as a sponsor for Perspectives in the future. If you're just joining, haven't lost my mind. We're just waiting for everybody to join. We'll give one more minute. And we've got our question on the table. Where are you dialing in from? And what's your least favorite housekeeping chore in honor of Professional House Cleaners Day? All right, I could just watch the chat all day, but I'm not going to. I'm going to get us launched into our webinar series. The September slump is what we're talking about today. And it's my pleasure to be hosting the panel. My name is Dr. Matt Pepsel here with Predictive Index, but I'm much more excited to tell you all about our panelists. I'm going to start with Meredith. Meredith Haberfeld, she is the founder and CEO of Think Human. And for the last 2 decades, she has coached CEOs, founders, and senior executives in fast growth organizations such as SoulCycle, Urbint, and Splice, and large multinational organizations such as Philips and Spotify. In addition to her work at Think Human, Meredith teaches at educational institutions, including MIT and the Assailant Institute. Meredith, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hello, so happy to be here. And I want to say about the Swiffer in the chat. I always wanted Swiffer shoes that you could just like put on your feet and slip around on the floor. Wouldn't that be good? All right. So if anybody here works on products, take it.
Yeah, get that done. Get that done and let us know. Well, second up on our panelists, we've got Erica Anderson-Rooney. She is the founder of Her Collective. She's a powerhouse in leadership, gender equality, and workplace culture with over 15 years of HR experience, including her role as chief people officer in the tech industry. She's the best-selling author of Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors and host of the podcast by the same name. She is the founder of Her Collective, which is a digital community and movement designed to empower women. Erica, thanks so much. It's always great to see you.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks, Matt.
And last but certainly not least, we have Mark Ranke. He's the Strategic Expansion Manager for the Predictive Index, and his passion for talent optimization began after seeing how great and terrible managers shaped team performance across industries from restaurants and construction to fitness and wellness. And he spent over 15 years in the fitness and wellness industry, mentoring professionals and building revenue-generating teams before joining PI back in 2019. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleased to be here. Love seeing my 3 hometowns represented. Milwaukee, my original hometown, Portland, my adopted hometown, and Richmond, the current place that I reside.
It is just meant to be. Look at that. Well, we're going to move into our slides, and I'll just do a little bit of light housekeeping for us. That is the fact that the webinar is being recorded, and it will be emailed to you, and you'll see that in your follow-up materials. We're going to have some audience Q&A at the end of the show, toward the end of the show. And you're going to want to use the Zoom Q&A feature so that we can be sure to see that your question came in. If you put it in the chat, we might see it. You put it in the Q&A, we will definitely see it. And you're going to want to stick around to the end because our panelists and I have some bonus resources for you. And we'll have the contact information as well in case you have some questions that we didn't have time to address on the air. So that's it for the housekeeping. Now, when we started talking about this concept of the September slump. So we're, talking about going from the freedom of summer to the routine now of back to work and knowing that we have to finish strong. I pulled some of this statistics, and you see on the left here, super productivity had this notion I liked. It was transitioning back to routine feels like loss, like we've lost something. There can be a little of that ho-hum to it. But also there's things that are happening inside of our bodies, inside of our brains when it comes to everything from circadian rhythms And the third one I thought was really interesting from care.com. Working parents, it's been a while since I've been having parents of young children, but working parents coordinate an average of 11.5 activities and send more than 17 messages on average per child on top of their day-to-day work. So there's a lot of management of the little people happening at the same time as trying to get back to work and so on and so forth. So I really, as we were thinking about the timing of this webinar, and we know we have executive appetite to kind of finish the year strong, this is something I wanted to recruit an expert panel, which I've done, and we're going to be able to talk about that. But to go next, I want to make sure we hit on a Menti poll, because we always want to hear from the audience and see what some of your experiences are like. So if you have a magic phone, you can point at that QR code, or if you turn to the chat, you're going to see a link directly to menti.com, or you could dial in those digits if that works for you as well. And we're going to have our first Menti poll question. I'll ask our panelists to respond and see what you think. The first is, which of the following are you seeing impact your organization? Is it post-vacation adjustment? Is it back to school disruptions for those working parents like I mentioned? Maybe some of the seasonal mood changes? What about the worky work stuff like increased Q4 pressure, workload stress? There's only so many months left to finish our fiscal year for those of us who are on a calendar fiscal. And then finally, what about general resistance to routine after summer, which was so relaxed in terms of its pace? What do you think, panelists? Any surprises? We seem to have a clear winner here.
You know, it was really hard for me to pick one because I'm
Right.
like, I'm a mom. I've got two little kids. They're 10 and 7. I was over here doing the math. I'm like, okay, 36 messages a day,
That sound about
23
right?
activities. And so I'm thinking back to school is going to win. I'm a little shocked that it's all about the increased Q4 pressure, to be honest. But I mean, hey.
It's a phase we're in. What's the lowest vote getter? Post-vacation adjustment and reentry? Okay, I could kind of see that. What's second most is, yeah, back to school disruption. To make it second most, it's pretty up there. And it is probably unfair to force everybody to pick just one if you had to pick one. Now, if we should have check all that apply, I'm sure it might be a little bit different. Some people are like, yes, across the board, seeing it. Well, let's go on to our second Menti poll question here as well. So what's the biggest challenge that this slump creates for your HR team specifically? Like when you see that some of the employees are a little sluggish or executives are a little antsy because they're like, we got to finish the year strong here. This one's open text. We'll see some of the answers as those come in as well. Low engagement, unhappy employees, tension, too much leave being taken. We got a little used to taking some of that leave. You may still have those unlimited PTO type things. What about loss of focus, increased performance, the PIP's performance plans and employee issues? Getting people on board, got to almost re-enlist them in the fight, so to speak. Engagement showing up a lot, burnout, incentivization. Good one. Getting it all done. How do you get it all done? How do you get it all done? Morale. Folks are quiet. Seem a little like subdued, huh? We'll do just a couple more of these. End of summer season, going into the slower season. Checked out. Yeah, I hear that a lot. Oh, my people are just checked out. It's hard to get them fired up again. Well, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about with our panel today. So I'm going to switch us over into the panel part of the discussion. And I think we should probably start with definitions. We put a term on here of the September slump. I don't think it's all that common of a term. So I kind of want to pull it apart a little bit. And Erica, I'm looking at you for this one. When you think about this September slump, what type of indicators let us know that we're seeing the slump? I think we hit a little bit on it in the Menti, but like when I come up with this term and we talk about it, what comes to mind for you?
For me, it really feels like it's that whiplash because you are coming out of summer, but yet, as that Menti poll showed us, we've got major Q4 pressures upon us, plus back to school, plus just everything that's going on in the world and life. But I've noticed that a lot of meetings they become more frequent, but less impactful. So there's a lot of meetings, but about what we're not really sure. A lot of people end up being triple booked. They're trying to manage their kids' schedules, do that. But I really think we saw it in that Menti engagement poll is engagement is down. And that's when people just feel blasé about the work that they're doing. And as a chief people officer, one of the things that I've always cautioned leaders on when it comes to this time of year is this tends to be the time of year where people really start to think about their life. It's Q4. They're thinking about what did we achieve in 2025? Is this the organization I want to be working at? And so their attention kind of gets pulled away from, I'm here to show up and do this amazing job. So, you see people not only have that disengagement happen, but you'll see like slower replies to emails. You'll see people maybe not show up to those meetings. It's a struggle across the board.
It sounds like this perfect storm where we got the Q4 pressures we saw in the mentee. At the same time, people are a little checked out. And if we hit them at the wrong time, they're thinking, yeah, is this really the place for me? It's a natural thing. But Mark, same question for you. When you think about this term of the September slump, or at least the phenomena we're trying to describe here, what comes to mind for you?
It's a very real thing that we have not talked about effectively. I've seen this in coaching personally in the past. I've seen this in a lot of the consulting work that I do with organizations. I think the one thing to add to what Erica mentioned is that typically what happens is annual initiatives that haven't been actioned yet in the first 9 months are piling up, and that list is constantly staring at leaders and staring at teams. And everybody says like, all right, who's going to swallow the frog? And, we see this situation where disengaged employees aren't being the ones to say, if not me, then who? And they're just sort of waiting for someone else to take action.
It's funny because like when you go out in June, you're like, oh, we still got half a year. I could take some vacation. All the team members are staggering them a little bit. And you come back and you're like, oh my gosh, there's only 3 months to get these annual objectives done. Like, where'd all the time go? It's unbelievable. Meredith, how do you describe this? What do you see when I talk about this natural shift from, we'll just call it summer to fall?
Yeah, I would say the big thing we notice is transitions in general are hard for human beings. Like transitions are just like, even bad things over time become easier than a transition, and transitions, even, whatever it is, difficult. So whether you're a parent or not, the summer vibe into like, okay, here we go, is it takes something. And then especially, I mean, we spoke about it briefly, but especially for parents, I am one of 14 and 16-year-old, and all of a sudden yourself as a worker are transitioning into a new schedule personally. Your kids are transitioning into a new school schedule, plus they're starting up sports and after school things. So you're like going 17 different directions. You don't have your rhythms going. And so all of that change is a lot to handle while things are picking up in that, end of the year push.
I love it. I love the fact that we've hit it from so many different angles. I think we've really got a good sense of what we'll just keep using the term September slump and what it is. But Erica, I want to know, so what are some of these cascading effects? What is it that we see? So we know we're experiencing it, but what are some of the trickle down, or however you want to describe it? Like, how does it show up in our business and some of our day to day?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. I mean, disengagement across the board, which we've already covered, but like, how does that show up, right? We're talking about people will come to all of these Zoom meetings. They don't have their camera on. They're very apathetic to the outcome. They're not so much go-getting, right? Creativity completely tanks. People end up wanting to have more of this checkbox, like check done, I showed up, check done, I sent that email, but they're not thinking about those downstream impacts. And I know one of the things we really notice is that productivity drag, because people start to skate in later in the day. They start to get out a little bit early. Yes, Teely in the chat says apathetic to the outcome, 100%. It's kind of like, let's just survive the end of the year. How many of you guys have heard that before? Like, I'm just out here trying to survive this quarter. I think it was Gallup said that like disengagement was pegging 9% for global GDPR, right? Like global GDP. And so that was just bananas, because that's trillions of dollars that is impacting these, these companies across the board. But what I spoke to a little bit earlier, which I think from the chief people officer perspective, it's that retention. People are starting to think about 2026. Where do I want to be with my life and my goals? Have I been promoted? Am I making the money I want to make? And like, look at all this hard work I did for the first 9 months of the year. Have I been recognized? If you haven't done a great job of all of those things, when you hit that September slump, you're going to have people hitting up the LinkedIn job boards real quick.
I hadn't made that connection before either. It's like, even if I'm coming back and I feel refreshed, I had a great vacation, I'm ready to lean back in, and I'm on a cross-functional team, and some of my other team players are experiencing that dip, I'm like, well, I can't do this all. So at some point you're still impacted, even if it's not personally, because everything's connected. Mark, what do you think? Same thing, cascading effects. How does it show up? And in your experience, have you seen it kind of manifest just so we can make sure we got a real finger on the pulse of this thing.
And I think one of the wonderful things about working for an organization that uses behavioral assessments really robustly is that we get a sense into how people respond to pressure. And because of the compression created by the holidays at the end of this quarter and the sort of things that have been chasing us for the first 9 months of the year, what happens is we start to see people who do not respond positively to time-bound pressure start to close in, start to kind of retreat a little bit, start to be more conservative with their resources. And they're sort of looking at the people who respond positively to time-bound pressure and like, wow, that person's crazy. Why are they so intense? And guilty as charged, of course. But I think we see that divergence, and that creates a lot of friction when we talk about getting teams back up to full speed and rebuilding momentum.
I love you pointing out that we have an individualized response to this. So I mentioned earlier, like I used to have young kids at home. They're grown now, thankfully. Sorry, Erica. Sorry, Meredith. Sorry, Mark. But the point is, this is very challenging, right? But it's an individualized response. So whether I'm feeling a certain way, or maybe I'm in that introspective mode you've shared with us, Erica, it doesn't mean that all of us are, but we have to be aware that people are having those different reactions. But Meredith, we're having this notion that now we've got our good understanding about what it is and how it shows up. What can we do about it? How do we either, I can't say we can prevent it, but we can try to minimize it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, what would you recommend for people listening in to say, I'm in HR. What can I do for myself? What can I do for my organization, the people around me?
Yeah. I think, I'm going to keep this bite-sized, but there are a lot of things that I think are going to get uncovered in this call. But the thing I would say right now is a year is a bigger time module than the human brain can really handle. We work in seasons. That's like how Homo sapiens work. And so breaking work, like people do annual planning. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with annual planning, but the human brain cannot work at that level. So breaking it into seasons and having these 90-day sprints so that when people come back from the fall, even if you did annual planning, even if your company is not going to change away from doing quarterly goals, no problem. Whether you're an HRBP who's supporting a team or a manager, like whatever your role is, look at from here till the end of the year. Forget about that there was ever a year goal. There's only 90 days and actually a little less than that. What does that look like? What are the most important things that we're going to gun for in that sprint?
Gotcha. So really chunk it down and keep it, because if it's too long, it would just kind of lose track of how possibly can I climb this entire mountain? You can't. Let's take it one season at a time.
And taking it out of the context of our annual goals, because I think that starts to feel like a wave pressing down on us, like 9 months of where we missed, instead of like, here's 90 days. Let's not even talk about it in the context of the year. Here's 90 days. What do we believe we can? It can be a stretch, but what do we believe we can accomplish? Get very real about that and have whatever hard conversations are needed, and then get everybody on board for that 90-day sprint.
Gotcha. Erica, I've heard you on podcasts. I've seen you deliver keynotes. Like, you're always great with the tips. What tips do you have for us if we want to minimize some of the effects of this transition we've been talking about?
Yeah, just to build off Meredith, I even break those sprints from 90 days, sometimes down into 2-week sprints for people. Because if they are really struggling and they're thinking 90 days, I've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, Halloween, all the things, it's too much going on, Hanukkah, all the things, can't do it. So sometimes I'll give them even smaller milestones. And then I like to front load September with a lot of recognition, recognizing the work that they're doing, but also what they're up against. So like, hey, I know all y'all just went back to school with your kids. Totally understand that. Take all the time you need to handle those things. Use the flexibility that we have in place. Get it done so you can show up like the parent you want to be. And by the way, we've got this real short-term goal right here. It's tiny, it's bite-sized. We're going to rock it out of the park. So that's one of them. But the other one that I think is so key in the last quarter of the year, this September time, is transparency. Where are you as a company, and why are these things of the utmost importance at this point in time? Because if your employees do not have that understanding as to like what's going on with the state of the business, what is the why behind the work we are doing, they're going to get too bogged down with everything that's going on in their personal life and everything else that's going on. And that why for the company is going to just completely vanish from their vision.
It's almost like at the same time that I know a lot of the executives, let's say again, we're on a calendar fiscal, you start to get absorbed in next year's planning cycle. It's like this year's not done yet. So it's a weird position for an exec to be in. Part of my job is to move on and get us ready for what comes next. But part of my job also is making sure we stay focused on delivering what we signed up for this year. So there's this sort of a dual thing that I'm hearing there when it comes to almost reminding people about the why for this year at the same time that we're working on next year's why also. Yeah. But Erica, I'll keep you on the hot seat for a second. Let's take ourselves to the mindset of a team leader. And now all of a sudden, I want to be driving the performance line because I want to do a good job. My team's responsible for something, but I also want to be empathetic for people that might be struggling a little bit with the transition or needing some time to kind of come back up to speed. How do I strike that balance?
I believe in empathy. I believe in leading teams with empathy because we never know what's going on behind the scenes. But we also have to provide clear directions and expectations. People love it when you give them a clear expectation of what you want to get out of them, what is expected. So I will often take that time if I'm leading a team, if it's an individual, we do that coaching where we reset those expectations. If there is something that feels big and looming, we break it down. But yes, Mark says clarity is kindness. That is huge because often, and also think about it this way, everybody wants to show up and do a good job. At least the majority of people do. They want to do good work. And if they don't have that clear communication, they might need that expectation reset. But I always keep them with that focus of every step forward is progress. And maybe we're not always taking those steps forward because maybe little Timmy got an ear infection and the flu after his first week back at kindergarten because that's what happens. Great. Take the time you need, show up and be a good mom. And oh, by the way, this is still the expectation. We can work together and get it done. And people lean into that because they feel like they can then do both.
Love that. Love that. Meredith, same question for you. When you think about your best advice to a team leader who's like, how do I hold the line? How do I demonstrate some level of empathy? Like, how do I sort of have my cake and eat it too?
In resilience research, there's something we teach called the ACT framework, which I think in hard moments, which I would call transitions, hard moments, I think is really useful. So ACT is acknowledge, center, and triage. So acknowledge that it is hard, that if you've got parents coming back, dealing with that transition, or people in that slump of, oh man, vacation is over, or the pressure of the year, like acknowledge what is real. Don't pretend that's not the case. People hate a fake cheerleader where it's like icing on a mud pie. Does not go well. So acknowledge what's real, then center on what still matters. And we already talked about some of those things like the why, and then real clarity about what needs to happen by when, and be able, that centering, I think one of the biggest parts of it is being able to quiet the noise for people. Like we're saying no to this, we're pushing pause on that, we're not doing these things, so we can center what is important and get all eyes and hands moving in that direction. And then triage, like, okay, we got those few things, let's get those things done. So I think that.
I like the triage step in particular because I think that in this day and age, I feel like the pace is just almost unsustainable. We sign ourselves up for too much. We're asked to do more. Hey, good news, AI is going to let us do 3 times as much and work 3 times as hard. And what is happening? So I feel like training managers and team leaders to understand like what's really essential. I think that we when you ask a team leader and they say, well, we've got these 10 priorities, you're like, well, then you don't know. That's not a thing. So what is it that makes it so difficult about triage, Meredith, when we kind of get down to brass tacks here?
Well, I would say it lives on 2 ends. Number one, it lives on at the level of the organization and the executives, because if you're in an organization where executives are pinging things like ping pong balls at people, where it's like, bing, 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 whatever was originally the most important stuff, all of a sudden they're like, okay, I can't even track that because I got ping pong balls flying all over the room. So there's that. And then on the other side, training leaders, anybody who leads a team, to be able to filter and have the ability to decipher, okay, we said these things were priorities. So when the 42 ping pong balls come at me, it is my responsibility to say, based on what I know to be important, here is how I think we should prioritize this, and say, here's how we're going to sequence it, or here's the cost, and be able to share back. Yes, we can do these 42 things, but here are the consequences of doing that. And here's my recommendation. And that skill is rarely taught. I mean, you'll hear this from me, I'm sure, again in the webinar, but for me, running Think Human, managers are the gift that keeps giving. It's like the ripple in the pond. You give managers a skill and it's just like bing, 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 because they touch everyone in the entire organization. So equipping managers with that skill to be able to figure out, even if nobody gives it to them, what are the things that are most important, and then how to prioritize against those things and serve back, instead of saying like, well, they didn't give it to me, so, it's
Right.
on them.
Or I'm going to look bad if I don't do all 42 ping pong balls.
Right.
So I'm just going to drown my team in ping pong balls.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I
Exactly.
love that. Equip the managers, but then expect them to lead. That's definitely important. And Mark, let's stay with these managers for a second. So managers, executives, we've got HR professionals who are dialing in here. How do we partner up with the execs and managers, some of which who, again, I always point this out, the average executive, we don't get trained in this stuff. We're just not naturally wired to, care about people in the same way. Doesn't mean we're bad people, but some of them are thinking, oh, the slump, this is nothing. We'll just muscle our way through this. How do we partner up better with managers and with executives?
I think the response that I want to share here is sort of a combination of the last two questions we were discussing, because they're both directly related to leaders and managers within an organization. I think they're in a unique position. And as a former departmental director of multiple departments and a leader within an organization who has retreated back to an individual contributor role, I've got some unique perspective here. Typically, leaders within an organization sort of have a sense of the light at the end of the tunnel. They're the ones who are participating in 2026 planning meetings right now, and that's refreshing in and of itself for most of them. They see the light at the end of the tunnel. They've sort of gotten a sense in their mind of what things are going to be like once this year is over. So they have that as a tremendous benefit. And for the most part, that really is a benefit. It's also a burden, because they're the ones who are responsible for creating the impulse that gets people moving back in the right direction. Me being an individual contributor today, I'm not as aware of the challenges that remain for the rest of the year. I'm not aware of the planning for 2026 right now. So I think that we have to acknowledge that the managers and leaders within an organization are put in a very unique position, sort of as that sort of hinge pin, for lack of a better term. But I think the one thing that wasn't mentioned that I think should be mentioned and we should be talking about is that the leaders themselves need to be sure that they defend themselves a little more thoughtfully because of that position that they're put in. And what we see because of the disruption, especially for business leaders and managers who are managers of managers and also have the other things happening in life, have families with kids going back to school and sports, what we see is that they tend to stop doing a better job of taking care of themselves in an effort to push that back out to everyone else. I think as HR professionals, one of the things that I can say as a consultant to HR professionals today, if you see that happening in your managers and in your leaders, someone has to tell them, hey, are you doing a good job of taking care of yourself? Have you defended your time to remain physically active? Are you working 9 hours in a row, or are you getting out and getting outside? So it's just a call to be the person who's aware of that on behalf of them if they're not.
Yeah, how many executives do you know who are like, well, we're just all doing so much right now. We're trying to deliver the year, but we're also working on next year. So I skipped the gym, or I didn't reach for the healthy snacks. I went for the other snacks. These kind of things that happen all the time. But Erica, Chief People Officer experience that you've had to partner with executives when it comes to this sort of helping them understand that this stuff matters. Like, what tips do you have for our audience?
Yeah, I actually want to add on to what Mark said too, because as a chief people officer, one thing that I have noticed in a lot of organizations that I've done work with is that not all executives really seem to struggle with the September slump, right? And the reason is because they sit in positions of power that have a lot more flexibility. And so they can step away and they can go to their kids' play and they can take a moment, and they are not held to the same level of accountability that all of our line workers are and all of our individual contributors are. So this kind of tacks into the question that you asked me, like, how do we talk to our leaders about this? I get real with my leaders and I'm like, look, I know you took little Sarah and little Tommy on that field trip that was yesterday, and I love that for you. I think that is wonderful. How do we ensure that everyone in our ecosystem can do the same thing? And quite honestly, we don't always have that answer, right? And so sometimes we have to think about that. How do we get creative? But when I'm actually really trying to then convince their mind to change everything, it's like one time I did an entire wellness day and I said, we're going to have to do one of these once a month for the rest of the quarter. Like, I just think that's going to have to be what we need to do in this instance. This was during COVID. Business for us was booming at the time. But as you all know, people were working like 60 hours a week because they had nothing else to do in their lives. So I like to talk to them in terms that really work, right? Pipeline information. What's going on in the pipeline? What are the retention costs? What happens if we burn out our very best group of top contributors because they're not stepping away and they're not taking breaks? And guess what? They weren't. And so we kind of had to put that forced break in to say, we're having a company shutdown on these days. And I did have to earn the trust, right? It was kind of that, try and trust with the first one. And when they saw the positive ROI and the impact and retentions, that year that we did that dropped way off because people felt valued. They had time for their families and they could actually take a minute to step away. But I think the biggest thing that it's just like, let's 100% make sure that if we're doing it at the top, like, we can do it at any level in this organization.
Yeah, it was one of the biggest. Meredith, you were going to weigh in? Oh, yeah, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Oh.
Okay, sorry about that. On the heels of that, I think that when you are in a position of power, if you don't see something yourself, you're like, but I don't see it. Like, if they're not seeing it, and then they're like, that can create your whole reality. I'm not seeing what you're talking about. And in that case, I think everybody on this call knows data talks, right? So data tells a story, whether it's engagement data, absenteeism, but being able to just present a little data so you can ground the conversation in reality and tie it out for them, showing the correlation between those things and missed revenue or project delays. So I think part one is data talks if they're not seeing it. And then part two, I like, Matt, how you said at the beginning, like, we should just power through, like, as though that's a strategy that's going to reliably work. And as I was thinking about this, my daughter, who's 14, she plays competitive soccer. And I was thinking about in the fourth quarter of a game, when the girls are really tired and you can see them kind of dragging, the strategy of just like, power through, come on, power through. Like, it'll work for a certain amount of time. Like, you can power through on adrenaline, but for like to sustain performance, power through just isn't a good it's not an effective strategy. So for a leader looking at like, okay, well, whether I believe whatever is happening behind the scenes matters or it doesn't matter, it's happening. You can see the data points. So how do you want to deal with that? And Erica's suggestions, I think, are amazing. But leaders, for the most part, in my experience, want to hit want to produce their results that they are accountable for. And when given the challenge or the problem statement, like, here it is, you're in the fourth quarter and the players are tired. What are you going to do? It takes like, okay, well, how do I need to organize myself and my team to amp up the kind of performance capability to get to the end?
It's so true. And the older I get, the more I appreciate energy and what it takes to conserve it, to restore it, to channel it, focus it, all these things. And you're so right. You just, I think that's when games are won or lost. It's really at the end, how well are we managing, how much capacity we have left. But Erica, your point reminded me too, in all the studies of positive psychology, et cetera, we talk about autonomy and mastery and purpose. And typically executives have more control over those things for themselves than frontline workers do. And so if we've not done the job as leaders, team leaders, to help them connect to experiencing autonomy within their span of control and some level of mastery and purpose, then it's almost like they're not resilient because we haven't created an environment where they can be resilient in that way. And I think you're going to see that. But Eric, I also want to point out, because again, HR professionals on the call, what about HR teams? Forget those execs and managers.
Aren't we the most burnt out? Aren't we the most burnt out of all of them?
I've never seen you as burned out as you are right now. I've never
Y'all.
seen you as burned out as you are right now as a field. So what recommendation do you have for HR leaders on the call that might be part of teams? Like what should HR professionals do for themselves when it comes to offsetting these effects?
I mean, I hate this analogy, but you know I got to give it. Is like you got to put your own oxygen mask on first,
There
right?
it is.
You absolutely have to. And I hate that one because everybody hates that one. But if you don't take care of yourself, you ain't taking care of nobody else, right? And I think anyone here who's a caregiver or a parent, they're going to understand that. Like sometimes you just don't have a minute to go to the bathroom by yourself when your 5-year-old is at the door. What do you do then? And it's kind of what Meredith was saying. Sometimes you've got a short-term solution. You can handle that little toddler at the bathroom. You can handle that employee relations issue. But then what are you doing after to recover, right? How are you building in those boundaries? We have all had those days where they have been 10, 12, 14-hour days. Maybe you've had to get up at midnight because the call is, taking place in India or China. And guess what? You're in the US. That stinks. What does that mean? Does that mean that you get up at 6 a.m. so that you can do all the things and be back at work by 8 o'clock? No. It means you say, hey, I was up till 2 a.m., solving this HR crisis, internationally. I'm going to show up a little later today. And I tell people it's all about those boundaries. Now, again, of course, when you're the chief people officer, if you're in one of those positions of power, you can do that more easily. And so what I say to everyone is if you are that chief people officer or you're the head of HR, make sure that your other people are doing it too. Make sure that they are stepping away. Ask them to step away. I know I've had team members where they've just been working and grinding because they want to do such a good job. And it's like, no, I don't want you to even be on this call at this point. So sometimes you have to use that position of power to put up boundaries for themselves. But another big one that I personally use, especially as an individual contributor or as a C-level leader, is peer support, right? Communities like this where you can actually come, like I love seeing all these things in the chat because everybody's sitting there going, oh my God, me too. And it's that moment of connection and belonging because often in HR, as you all know, and I wish you could see it, I've got a little sticker on my computer. It is a dumpster that's on fire. It's got a pair of sunglasses and it says, I'm lit. Okay, so we've got to take care of the dumpster fire that is HR sometimes. And so you take care of the emergency and then, you put the oxygen mask on, you breathe, you recoup, you recover. Don't be afraid to say no. And if you need those dumpster fire stickers, they're on Amazon.
There we go. I love that. We'll include the link in the notes that go out. But I tell you, I've got an eye on the clock, and we've only got the time has gone so quickly, but we've still got so much that I want to cover. And Meredith, I'm going to ask you this one. We've talked a lot now about executives, managers. We've talked about HR teams themselves, but we also have these different groups like remote workers. We've got hybrid workers. We've been talking about parents, for example, of children. So what do you think about tailoring the approach to these different groups, these different populations, if you will? What techniques or tips would you have for us in that regard?
I think there's like a short-term and a long-term answer to that. The longer-term answer, we already touched on a little bit, managers are the gift that keep giving. Like you train them to be able to flex, to understand like, okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all management style. I really got to be able to read who this human is, what motivates them, what are the things that are their challenges. So training your managers is not necessarily something you're going to come off this call and be like, okay, great, we're going to get a new initiative that's going to happen right away. So that's the longer term answer. I think the short term answer is giving managers some guidelines, like a little bit, like a one-page playbook for working parents, generally what they need is flexibility. They need clarity, but they need flexibility. So it doesn't mean lower the expectations, but give them flexibility on how they get it done. For remote and hybrid workers, the connection and shared accountability really makes a difference in a way that co-located folks get in a natural way. So letting managers understand if they're not already doing things like virtual pulse meetings with sprint accountability, where everybody gets to show up, say, here's where I am on progress, have that human connection with their team members that creates some energy and momentum. So I think the big picture is equipping managers, and then there's a short-term and a long-term way to approach that.
Love that. Love that. We've had so many questions come into the Q&A that I'm actually going to wrap up the panel part of the discussion here. and get us ready to have just a few more. We are getting ready to start the audience portion of the Q&A, as I mentioned. And while we're waiting on anybody who's got some last minute questions to get in there, put them into the Q&A button there in Zoom. We're going to add a link into the chat, and that's in recognition that companies are using talent optimization techniques to drive better business results through their people practices. So if you're interested in learning about the Predictive Index, the sponsor of this webinar, and how talent optimization can help inside your organization, or if you're a consultant, how you can bring it to your clients, or if you're already familiar with PI, just use that link to let us know. At the same time, we'd love to hear from you, our attendees, when it comes to what you'd like to get out of perspectives in 2026. We're already starting to think about next year. So if you think about a poll that we have here for you, what kind of topics? This is just open text, put in anything you want. We'll go ahead and sort through it. Well, what would you like to see us cover next year when it comes to topics on webinars just like this one? We've got the rest of the year planned out for you already, but we're getting ready to think about what comes into 2026. So we're going to leave that poll up while we go into the audience Q&A portion of the show here, but this is something that we'd love to hear from you on. All right, here comes the first question. This one comes from Richard. Have any of you experienced deliberate slowdown periods in the summer? For example, like going to summer Fridays, early dismissals, 4-day work weeks. How do you define when the slowdown period stops and the ramp up period starts? How do we get them back to sort of a quote unquote normal working schedule? Who wants to go first on that one?
I mean, I'll take it, but just
please.
because I've worked for a French company in the past, and this was wonderful because like they didn't do anything for all of August, right? Like they were off just exploring Europe, having a great old time, and all of us US people were over here like, well, what am I supposed to do? Ain't nothing going on, right? And so when I worked for a European company, it was really nice because they embrace that work-life balance. They really do shut down, and it showed us that like, okay, this is the time where we can plot and thought and get ahead. And so that was like one perspective, but we have done things like summer Fridays, summer slowdowns, and we tend to identify that based off of where the bulk of our employees are, right? If we're in a certain location, when kind of do those schools let out? Because they all kind of go around the same time, you know, a few weeks here and there. And that's when we kind of try to initiate it. And then usually same thing when we come back. Now, I will tell you guys, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. My kids are on year-round school. So actually Friday is their last day of school for 3 weeks. We go to school for 9 weeks. We're off for 3 weeks. So this September kind of slump thing, like it's up and down for me because I've got all of the, what you called it, fatigue and all of that from switching of the schedules. So work with what is going on in your area is what I find to be the best, but know that there are always outliers. There are people like me who've got these weird year-round school schedules, which by the way is a blessing for any working parent, but embrace that, talk to your people, see when their schedules are going crazy, when they're slowing down, and work with them. But Mark, Meredith, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that one.
I think you leave someone behind no matter what decision you make, and that's really the hard part. But I think the critical thing really is to ask, even if it's at the individual level of the manager, just checking in with their team. And that's something that is remarkably scalable. They can bring that to a meeting and spend 10 minutes in a meeting getting that from their individual teams. I think that's probably the thing that's hidden in plain sight, that we believe it's our responsibility to come up with this great idea about how to time things perfectly. I think there's some magic in just being humble enough to ask, hey, what's going on? Does this sound about right? And speaking from the perspective of a parent whose kids started school earlier, and with the fall sports season, it was 3 weeks earlier. It was full tilt right out of the gate. So I think you really do have to get to know your people at an individual level in that sense.
And I think that I'm loving the spirit of partnership, but it also will tell you how much trust you have in your organization, because when you have a manager who's trying to be flexible with their team because they've had the conversation, they're approaching it in the spirit of partnership. We don't require butts and seats, these kinds of things. We want outcomes, whatever it is. And then the other team says, well, wait a second, we're not being given that same latitude. That can create real strain in the organization. So we just have to acknowledge that. But I want to go on to another question that's also reflective of the business reality. And this comes in and it says thousands of employees have been laid off this year, but we're talking about empathetic leadership. Layoffs don't feel empathetic for those who are left behind, kind of that survivor's guilt kind of thing too. And certainly trust has been hurt in those situations. How can HR leaders support the organization and employees through the rest of the year when business realities and compassionate leadership may be at odds?
I'll jump in on this one.
Yeah, please do, Meredith.
this is a lesson I personally had to learn as a leader. So I feel like I've walked this road, and that is if you index on either side too hard, either empathy or business results, you're in bad shape. I personally indexed too hard for a long time on empathy and human being, like individual human connection. And what I discovered was, oh, that's actually the indexing on the like the well-being of any specific subgroup or individual is at the expense of the whole. And so how I was able to reframe it for myself was that taking care of the health of the business is actually taking care of the people. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way because I was like, oh no, this person, that person, these people. But for HR folks to really be able to anchor ourselves in that if we are not taking care of the health of the business and its sustainability, we are not taking care of the people, and finding the right narratives to embed that inside the organization so it doesn't feel like airy-fairy fluff, but for real.
Yeah. And I think that, we have a responsibility as leaders and as HR professionals to sort of have that level of maturity. And it doesn't mean it's easy. It's hard to be around people who are in pain, and they need to be given their space to kind of work through those things. But we have to strike that balance. If we're over indexed on the welfare of the business and we're cold with people, that's no good. But the opposite is also true. And it can prolong coming out of a natural transition like that. But Erica, I've got this
Can
next.
I just jump in?
Please.
Sorry,
Yeah.
one more thing I want to say, you just reminded me of, and then I'll pass it to you, Erica, is for anybody who's familiar with the change curve, like anytime there's change, it's like it sucks, and then you start to climb out of the ditch. And one thing I just want to highlight is I am not suggesting that right after a riff that everybody's like, all right, it's okay, because this is for the health of the business. It sucks. And there is a very human toll that happens. And if we pretend that's not the case or that it's not hard, that is totally counterproductive. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there, that it's both at once, which is this is really hard. It is not easy, and it's really painful for everybody, especially those who lost their jobs. And here we are, and we like the health of the whole really will take care of not only the people that are left, but sometimes even creating new opportunities when we are taking care of the health of the whole.
Yeah.
Sorry, back to you, Erica.
No,
And Matt, I'm not even going to let you ask me what you want to ask me yet. I'm going to go back off of what Meredith said and also what Robert is saying in the chat about discipline minimizes systemic and systematic institutional flaws and mistakes. Empathy is tolerant of sampling human errors. I think of this distinction of the errors is worthwhile. And what I will add on that is one of the best riffs I have ever seen completed was by a leader that came up, and he did a company-wide meeting because we've already talked about clarity is kindness. And he said, I have broken your trust. And that's the thing we all need to recognize. When we have to do these big riffs, those people trusted us to employ them. They trusted us with their livelihood. So acknowledging we have broken your trust, we understand here is why we did it. Here is where the mistake was made. Maybe we, made the wrong prediction about a certain technology. Maybe we hired too fast and too quickly or too much. Explaining where your error was and taking ownership of that error and now saying, here is how we are course correcting. That is a way to have both the discipline and the empathy, and then also put that layer of transparency in there so that everybody's not sitting there fearful of what's going to happen. But all right, what did you really want to ask me now, Matt?
Well, Alexander would like to know, going back to Erica's comment on the leader and frontline divide on flexibility, what tips do you have for us to support our frontline workers through the slump, e.g., the lack of daylight, when we can't restructure work or the change management to free up their schedules? So there's only so much we can do. We want to be flexible. Like, how do we kind of meet in the middle here?
It's hard because it's a case by case basis, but I would often do something as simple as like, hey, we're shortening all meetings that were once an hour are now 45 minutes. Hard stop. Like nothing goes over. We're not going back to back meeting to meeting to meeting. And when you take everything, if it was a 30-minute meeting, guess what? Now it's 20. So shortening all of those things and giving people that time to get outside, right? SAD, seasonal affective disorder, is a big issue for a lot of people right now. And if they are chained to their desk, click clacking away, yeah, they're going to have some problems as we go on. So try to find those little, I like to call them micro moments throughout the day, but you have to work. I mean, it depends on your situation. Because if you're talking about retail workers or manufacturing and they can't step away from the line, that's totally different. And then when I get to things like that, I do really try to lean in heavy on EAP, on recognition, on, surprise days off where you can, because it is challenging when people have to be glued to the seats.
Makes sense. We're going to get into
Hold on. Caitlin says, how would you adjust for this in manufacturing? I did do this in manufacturing, Caitlin. And what we would do is we would try to give them little extended breaks. So instead of those like 15-minute breaks here and here, we would give them 25 or 30 so that they could get outside. They could have a little bit more time to handle the things that they needed to handle. Some of them would continue to work like longer, right? Like if they needed to add in more minutes at the end of their shift, like they would stay longer, but they had those breaks in the middle of the day was a big one. Also with manufacturing, Caitlin, we would play with their schedules. And if people had like, hey, I can be flexible this week, but not that, we would move schedules around. It's not easy. I'm not saying it worked great, but the best thing was the extended breaks.
Dig it.
I just think, Matt, I keep jumping on you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay, Meredith. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that as real as the September slump is, something I keep thinking about as I'm listening to this conversation is that those kinds of slumps, in my observation, and I'd love to hear in the chat from this amazing community if people see the same thing, but in my observation, they happen throughout the year. There's kind of the January getting back into the groove of things, and that transition is hard. There's transitioning into summer when all of a sudden you've got a lot of people out and the burden of extra work on the people that are remaining. And so I think a lot of the strategies that we're talking about are not just September slump strategies. They really are, how do you embed these kind of skills inside the organization so that leaders are managing energy, not just results?
Yeah, 100%. I think the cycles are happening furiously, and every business kind of might experience them differently, or they may be natural and wired in. If you have a seasonal business, you're going to see it a little bit differently. So I do love that we can extrapolate some of the conversation, the techniques, the tips. We've hit on the fact that it happens to everybody. Executives experience it, managers, but we also experience it differently. A working parent will experience it differently than maybe a remote worker versus somebody else, like all these types of things. So this has been a fabulous panel discussion. I'm going to ask Rachel to bring the slides back up, and we're going to get wrapped up in this way. We've got some of the different guest promotions and how you'll be getting the contact information. You'll see some of it in the chat right now, but you'll be getting all of the contact information, et cetera, in the follow-up materials. But in terms of some of the takeaways, Erica has for us Level Up Your LinkedIn Training, which is going to give you the secret to getting that coveted the top
contributor badge.
Yeah, the top contributor badge. And also, you want to make sure you listen to Erica's 2 podcasts. She's got AI Voice for Victim. And I mentioned before, Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors. They're both on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So check out Erica's work there. Meredith has Think Humans blog post, which is how leaders can build resilient teams in a world of uncertainty. So we're going to have a link for that for you in the follow-up materials as well. Mark's got a tip to read more from PI on navigating seasonal shifts for business growth. So very much on topic for us today. And for me, I'll promote the fact that Erica came onto my podcast recently and talked all about how she teaches us how to get unstuck, right? And good news, we can start small. So we don't have to blow everything up to do it. So that's really great. And we have a book giveaway. Our winner this month, thanks so much, is Patricia Callahan. Patricia, not only will you get a signed copy of my book, Erica's got one for you too. So look at that, big winner. So thanks so much for being here with us as always. And if we start to think about our tip sheet, so we thought about the September slump, and instead of giving you 10 tips, I wanted to keep it even more bite-sized, give you 8 tips. Look at that. We're already transitioning back in. So I don't want to overwhelm you. But the reason that we set up the tip sheet this way is you'll benefit from it for yourself. You should review it with your own HR team, for example, yourself. But it's designed that you can just forward it to your managers as well if they have team members. I saw a lot of that in the chat and in the questions about how do we help others kind of in the organization make sure that they work better with their people. That's how we've kind of designed that tip sheet as well. And the last slide when we talk about is we love the fact that you come to us every month. We've got such a loyal following. Next month, we're going to be talking about the business of HR. What does that even mean? We're told all the time, oh, we have to be more business relevant and all these things. We're going to have an expert panel talk all about the business of HR and how we can turn business strategy into measurable business value. So I'd like to thank our panelists, Meredith, Erica, Mark. Thanks so much for being with us and sharing your insights. Biggest thanks of all to you, our audience, for coming month after month. The chat was exploding this month, as always, just really supporting one another, offering tips and recognition. And thanks, of course, to the Predictive Index, our sponsor, and their talent optimization consultants around the world, making talent optimization dreams come true. Thanks, everybody, so much for joining us, as always. Look forward to seeing you again next month, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.